And we'll apply ourselves to a little bit of Portuguese news today. We'll have a look at the front covers virtually of the Portugal News and the Portugal Resident, and anything else you want to chuck our way. One thing that had you going immediately to your YouTube channel yesterday was the latest development of the digital ID. What's bothering you about that, Tony?
Well, digital IDs bothers me generally because I believe, I've seen, because I lived in Hong Kong for so long, and we regularly went to China. Like, I'm not sure how many people who've never sort of visited Hong Kong, because we always think of Hong Kong as being so separate to China. But for example, I lived in a city called Toon Moon in Hong Kong, and for us it was actually closer to go to Shenzhen in China than go to Hong Kong Island to go shopping, for example. So we regularly went over the border into China, and I've got relatives in Zhuhai and in Chongshan as well, so and Hunan as well, for that matter. But I've been kind of traveled quite a lot in China. And we saw, I saw the change. I first went to China during the Beijing Olympics, when it looked as though China was going to start to open up to the rest of the world. And,
it looked like it.
It did kind of really feel like it was working probably until the mid 2010s, I want to say, when it started getting back into that kind of vibe again of authoritarianism. And and we saw the introduction of the social credit scheme.
Did you?
I've tried to have conversations with even relatives in China about things like social media bans and things like that, and they don't talk. They just, it's like talking to a politician. You can't have a conversation about it. And now it's to the point.
What do you mean? What do you mean? They don't want to talk about it? They're scared to talk about it, or they just wish you wouldn't bring it up?
It's impossible to know. It might be a combination of all three. But when I tried to have a conversation, for example, with my brother-in-law about like Facebook, and I know he knows about it because he works in Macau. He lives in Zhuhai in China, and he commutes to Macau. Okay. Macau being the ex-Portuguese enclave, is similar to Hong Kong in a way. But when you go to Macau, all of a sudden you can use YouTube, you can use Facebook, you can
really,
I mean, you walk over the border,
and then all your alerts start pinging.
Yeah. So I know that and obviously if you're standing close enough to the border, you can do it also.
Yes.
So and I mean, I'm not sure if people who haven't been there understand how close it is. So for example, when I'm standing in my brother-in-law's apartment, his view out the window is the casino strip in Macau.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're right there.
Yes.
It's like there's.
Oh, so his commute is just to walk across a few streets to get from one country to another.
Yeah, exactly. So, and it's not quite that close in Hong Kong, but it's pretty close.
Yeah,
it's pretty close.
And all of this to say, you have experienced digital identity, and
you
think is coming here.
So what I'm saying is, it got to the point where now you everything's on your phone. All of your digital IDs on your phone.
Yes.
To get from, like, in Portugal, I'm just trying to think of a it'd be like trying to, if you want to go from Lisbon to Porto, right?
Yes.
That's in China, that would be called the Porto Special Administrative Region. It's got a fence around it.
Yeah.
When you drive up to a border, you have to show your digital ID if you wanted to go to Lisbon, for example. Depending on your credit score, they might ask you why are you going to Lisbon? Why are you going? Or they might not let you out of Porto.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or they might not let you. Well, what was once a conspiracy theory squad of the shows is true. And I haven't been there for 5 years.
Okay.
So I mean,
this was happening for you over 5 years ago.
Yeah. And I remember little things like I often tell the story about so sometimes in Shenzhen, for example, I had to go to government offices, and when you go to like, for example, the car licensing place, and this will have only got worse now. And for example, the first time you go in, it takes a face scan of you, and then the next time you go, you don't have to go through security anymore because the building knows who you are and it greets you in Chinese, you know.
Yes, yeah.
So it's all face scanning and done like that, and you have a social credit score, right? And what that means is it could be things like something you've done in business, or like there's things they obviously do to make the people happy. They say, well, people who've got criminal records and things like that will have a lower score, but it could also be things like you've known to be critical of the party, or you've put bad posts on social media and things like that. And this could stop you from getting a mortgage. This could stop you from getting a job. This could stop you from even traveling, because the way China's set up, some of the, especially the big cities, are kind of like, you can't just go there. You can't, do you know what I mean? You can't move around freely. It's almost like lots of little different countries.
Yeah. You know? Okay. Yeah. Administration, bureaucratic and security administrations, effectively.
And I mean, when you're driving there, it's again, I've never been anywhere like it. There may be other places like it that I just haven't been. Maybe North Korea, I don't know. But like when you're driving in a city like Shenzhen, and you don't notice it until the evening, but when you're driving, it's like every couple of seconds, it's like flash, 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 just constantly being photographed. Photographed, constant. Everywhere you go, there's CCTV. Like in some of the cities, when you jaywalk, the fine is immediately deducted from your bank account. And in some of them, they even put like immediately they put a picture.
Very Portuguese. Yeah, okay.
They put a picture on the like they'll have a monitor near the place, and it'll come up there with your name, you know, like in real time, has just been fined for jaywalking, you know.
No.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Well, it's very interesting to having this conversation about this with you, because you have that first-hand experience. And I'd like to ask you more about how the Chinese people, I mean, you can't speak for all of them, obviously, but you have a better sense of it than I do, for example, and what that means for us here then. And that's why, of course, you've been, I think, quite vocal and quick to go to YouTube or to record something about it. This is one of the stories in recent times here in Portugal that you're interested in. And there it is, pride of place on your YouTube channel. Please subscribe to the Portugeeza channel, because if you don't, that's ignorant, that's dignity. So there it is, the first one there.
Well, they gaslight you with and they've gaslit because of course for many mainland Chinese people, their lives have improved greatly in the last.
Well, there you go. So that's an important part of this conversation.
And they're gaslighting us as well now, because they're saying, well, it's for our security. And the thing they're trying to say now, this is what I pointed out when you read this, when you watch these bureaucrats speaking, they tell you the truth between the lines, you know, because they're lying by gaslighting. This is just my opinion, by the way. Because they're lying by gaslighting. Sometimes you read between the lines. So they'll start the conversation by using words like "it will be voluntary," and then they'll accidentally say something later on like "this will come into force."
Yes,
you know,
the voluntary thing will come into force.
Yeah, in the same conversation, and then they'll say things like, "Oh, this will." So I mean, I went through a news article that was in the Portugal News, I think it was, and who, by the way, it's sometimes their translations are a little bit so, but sometimes I'm quite impressed by the stuff they report. You know what I mean? I think they kind of fly under the radar a bit because they're in English.
Yeah. The Resident do the same, I think.
Yeah, but some of the stuff they report, I think, that wouldn't be in the Portuguese press. That wouldn't be the Portuguese press.
And again, that's a benefit for us being foreigners, isn't it?
Exactly. This is an example of, you could say this is maybe an example of, if not white privilege, expat privilege, I suppose, which is another thing.
Yeah.
But
there are two parts to that, aren't there? I think there is we're too small to be worried about. So you kind of let those rumblings happen. But also it's hard to track as well, isn't it? It's like, you know, the nuance can be put forward in a way that might not be immediately understood. It's just like dissident journalism.
Yeah. So it's always worth looking. I like both I like both of them for different reasons, but they both do that. They both report on news that may otherwise go unheard of, but
or be editorialized in a different
or
way.
be editorialized in a different way. Exactly. I mean, they like I mean, just to give you an example, and it's one I know that you spoke about. I can't remember who the reporter was who spoke about the
Natasha Don. I think you're probably talking about. Natasha Don has a very, very good view on a rounded view.
And I mean, I reported her piece on YouTube and got a strike.
Did you?
From YouTube? Yeah. So that will give you an example of how free in a way they are to report, because I literally reported her piece and got a strike for misinformation of YouTube.
Well, there are all sorts of interesting reasons for that, I think, with the resident. But anyway, I want to come back specifically to the digital ID thing, and you set it up beautifully there as a personal experience and being in a culture where it's already very firmly part of life. Is it? If, let's say you live in. There's something very interesting to me about how when countries are being reported on, or wars for that matter, you know, there's a Ukrainian war at the moment, and there are people who live in Ukraine who are unaffected by it. However, when you hear about the Russia-Ukraine war, you would think that every street is on fire, and God forbid, I'm not making a this is not in any way.
Hong Kong protests were like that, weren't they?
Exactly, and it's always the same everywhere you go, especially with a country like China. It's huge. So when you say happening in China, that might mean just a tiny bit. Is that the case with digital ID? Is it a city experience? And are there?
It's definitely mostly the cities. I mean, you can see it in Portugal, to be fair, can't you? I mean, you can't drive a tractor around with no number plates in Lisbon, can you? You know what I mean?
Yes. Well, although I did see a vehicle, I think it was one of those old sort of Matavellia, old guy killer cars, and it had a hardboard wing on it as well, cable tied or tied on with string, going down the Marginal in Lisbon. I thought that's why I love this city. But I take your point. People do behave differently in towns and cities, and that will be the case here, won't it? The hotspots for the digital ID will obviously
ultimately, and I know I've said this before, and interestingly, people are going to think I've got a secret crush on Katia, because this will be the third time I've mentioned her just in this particular show. But interestingly, I remember her agreeing with me on this point, because this is something that you know, the World Economic Forum has described, is that eventually there will be a certain elite and people who kind of buy into this kind of globalist digital ID sort of scenario, who live in the cities.
Yes.
And they actually describe the left, they call them the left behind, you know, which is the people who choose to live in the old, you know, rural villages and live that kind of different off-grid kind of style life.
And that's an accepted part of this philosophy or life view, is it? That those people will be left, will they be left behind and left alone?
Well, I think, Well, I've spoken about that before. I mean, I would certainly want to be in the bit outside, but if you've been like me and you've watched a lot of kind of dystopian movies, that can be
does it?
It can be good or bad. I mean, but yeah, you watch a movie like Demolition Man with Sylvester Stallone in it. I mean, I feel like I could see some of that coming true, the kind of emasculation of men, and the kind of like people getting ticketed for just because they say a swear word, and that's offensive. So that, you know,
and their digital overlords are managing their lives.
Exactly, and it's happening bit by bit. It's happening.
It would appear to be the case, and I think it's very important for us to have a sort of big and open and an interesting conversation about this, and to look at what the alternatives and options are, of course, as well, because there's an inevitability about it. And can I just finish?
There is an inevitability about it.
May I conclude with the Chinese part of this, and let's bring it home, as in home to us here in Portugal. How, generally speaking, do Chinese people feel about what they're experiencing in your experience of talking to them, seeing them operating?
I think most of them are very happy because of the convenience,
Interesting.
the convenience angle, right? Which is
Yes.
also the gaslighting I see from the EU, who's talking about it now. So they'll say things like, "Well, it's going to help you again." They say it's going to help us at border controls, right? And
Yes.
and of course, my question again was, hang on a minute, when I'm going out of the EU, that's someone else's, or you know what I mean?
It's someone else's
Why?
problem.
What are you talking about?
Yeah.
So what borders exactly are you talking about? And I also said that in the context of knowing that some EU countries have recently started doing border checks again, right?
Yes.
So they're talking about, well, it's going to make you. So this is what they do, isn't it? They. Oh my god, they're going to make our life easier, and they're going to protect us, right? Where have we heard this before? It's going to make it easier for you. It's going to make it, frictionless and
Yes.
And to me, I drew a parallel with something else that I thought probably a lot of my subscribers would agree with me on, is I don't like to use the self-checkouts in supermarkets.
Yeah.
I do sometimes, though. I must admit. So, for example, my local Pingo Dos, they've introduced self-checkouts. But what happens now is I keep meaning I want to have a word with it. There's a guy I know who works in there because he's also doubles as my postman. This is the kind of small town Portugal that I live in, right? But I want to say to him, where just for example, the other day I was there and the queues were pretty long, but I could see that a couple of the checkout people were doing other things. Like one of them was washing the security alarm thing near the door.
Well, they could have been on a
till. Yeah, and so what I did, because I thought, well, that's annoying, so I'm going to go and use the self checkout.
Yes,
and so I'm going to say to him, look, surely if you were them, you would go,
Shirley.
oh shit, right. I'm gonna open a checkout, because otherwise I'm going to lose my job to this bloody robot.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they might say, well, I don't like this job anyway. I mean, this is all part of the same conversation, isn't it? Like jobs worth having and so on. I mean, presumably he's there because he's earning money, not because he loves the particular job. I don't know for sure, but this is all part of it as well, isn't it?
Sometimes I want to say to people, did you ever go backpacking and do all that kind of kind of nasty jobs? I mean, I did, and I've
done nasty jobs, definitely, yeah, but not.
Yeah, I mean, I've done some really nasty jobs, and sometimes you might want to say to people, well, it could be a lot bloody worse than working in Pingo Dos. I could tell you that.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not knocking it. I'm not knocking work. What I'm talking about is how people, if they're not particularly attached to what they're doing, they might not be sorry on one level to see it go. And if, it's like it's all
maybe
part of this conversation is everything that's being done to us, isn't it? That's what I find fascinating about it. And that's why I'm interested in the Chinese experience. So I don't know anyone over there. You're my connection to that. And I'm very interested in human behavior and how people drift into this. And that's why I said I think it's an inevitability. It's based on convenience, isn't it? It's based on legislation, and it's very likely to happen.
A lot of people in, especially in those southern cities, like Shenzhen, I mean, it's they call it the biggest migration in the year. So on Chinese New Year, when everyone in Shenzhen gets up and goes back to their hometowns, it's considered to be the biggest human migration in the world. Right. Like literally millions of people. And I've joined it, and it's an unbelievable experience going down like an 8-lane highway that's just absolutely rammed with people going back to their rural roots. And many people have been lifted for the holiday, for the Chinese New Year holiday. So many people have been lifted out of poverty. And I mean, I've been to rural China. So I went with my brother-in-law and some other family members, Chinese people, out to Hunan, to their old rural village. And of course, that money gets back there as well. So people are prepared to. So, I've been at a house. It's quite funny. I've been into a big, kind of posh, nicely built house where people are putting cigarettes out on the floor in the dining room.
Right.
So what I'm saying is, I'm not insulting them, but I'm talking like in the real use of the word provincial.
Yes.
But like a nice new Hyundai parked out the front, a gold watch,
Yes.
Um,
The trappings of
but they obviously don't know how to behave. You know what I mean? It's really quite funny because
Yes.
it's very new money, and so a lot of people have been lifted out of poverty by the regime there, and so they're prepared to put up with, in my opinion, from
Yes,
what I
the
saw,
inconvenience. Yes.
they're willing to tolerate quite a lot. And of course, if not everyone gets a bad social credit rating, do they?
No, that's right. That's right. It's
Yeah.
just the likes of us who probably who feel like we can't help
Well,
ourselves.
what you do is when your Guilo relative from Hong Kong comes and starts asking you whether it bothers you that you can't use Facebook, you just look at him blankly like you don't know what he's talking about.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. Or you presumably in a very sophisticated version of this society, you buy a better credit score. But anyway, let's not get into that right now, because that's where it goes, isn't it, with human beings? Right. We'll come back to this. I'm very interested to hear what your thoughts are on the subject, because it is heading this way, it would appear, and that's why the Portuguese has recorded not just one video. This is the latest in a series. I feel 3 videos about the digital ID for Portugal. And interestingly, you mentioned about the comparison between city life, which is all about the social credit score, and rural poverty. And suddenly, rural poverty is looking a whole lot more attractive, isn't it, for people? And people are moving to Portugal to enjoy rural poverty, aren't they?
Yeah.
Within the context of this whole conversation, I know it's relative.
Mm.
I'm not making a virtue of suffering or in being insulting to people. But we've got lots of lovely comments here. Fantastic. Thank you, everybody. Especially going back to learning Portuguese, of course, and smashing that like button. I don't know even if we're going to get a chance to talk about this topic today, but I am measuring the days of sunshine, Tony, and the balance is in my favor, but only just, I got to say. Thank you. Smashing the like button will make the sun come out, so please do that. Bon dia from Pam, who is going to Lisbon, as she told us, and we even saw the pictures of that. Carl, it's ignorant me. I thought it was saying that's dignity. I thought it was saying they's dignity or that's dignity at first, I've got to say. Jackie also says, I can read it, but only understand a few words, but it helps with learning. Absolutely. Keep reading, keep watching. Nunu recommended some old black and white films to us, which we started to watch last night, and my kids were picking out some words on there. I did incentivize them. I was paying them in a fit of pique, saying, I'll give you 2 cents for every word you can understand. And it cost me dearly. Portuguese is difficult, but not impossible. You just need lots of practice. Join us tomorrow with Philomena. We are learning more about the language and the culture tomorrow, as we do every month with Philomena. And we've got the old guy in Europe as well. James, a big fan, obviously, of learning Portuguese and encouraging others to do the same. All languages are challenging to learn, some more than others, of course, but any language is challenging. Yes,
yeah.
Mr. S, it's difficult to learn a foreign language, but there are some people who don't even try and say hi or thank you in French, for example. Yes, don't be that person. Pamela Smith, I'm not finding it easy to learn, but communicating with Portuguese people who don't speak English is always fun and an adorable experience. So there you go. That's lovely to hear. Life is difficult, so I think I'll just not even try. Yes, that gets a bit harder, I suppose, than just the language. Agree, Mr. S, says Jackie. When people don't try, it's pure laziness. Going back to Hong Kong now. Morning, Ray. Good to have you here with us this morning. What time is flying with the Portuguese, as it always does. One of our wine clients was Stanley Ho from Macau. I always love sending him a Christmas card with Bon Tal, ho, ho, ho. Very good. Learning to walk was difficult, at least in one point in all of our lives. Anyone just decides to not even try. Not many kids. Well, you get a lot more encouragement to learn how to walk than you do to learn a foreign language, I think. But to take your point, Jules Tours in London, brilliant on YouTube. Yeah, loving these walk and talks. And talking of nostalgia for your old place via YouTube or the telly, I saw a bit of this. The publicity is very good for this new Northern sitcom. Felt a bit of nostalgia for Bolton, says Pam, after watching Alma's Not Normal. There are some cracking stereotypes in the vein, I think, of the royal family. It's very good, the little clip I saw. Bon dia todos. Can't be bothered to get a VPN and iPlayer, however. I can find a different way to see that. What was once a conspiracy theory. That's what we're talking about basically this morning, isn't it? I was in Beijing in 98 when Portugal handed over Macau to China. Guterres was the PM, Portuguese PM, and came to our trade fair. He's gone on to bigger and better things, isn't he, Antonio Guterres? I had a brain injury, couldn't write or read for many years. Recently, I passed a TEFL, and if I had not tried, I wouldn't have done it. Huge thanks to our own Portugal influence. If you don't try, exactly. Digital ID, says Jackie, on addressing the other big subject of the morning. It's all about control. It's getting stupid. In UK, you can now go to prison for not registering your budgie. No, that's not a joke.
Oh, we've
What
got
was,
to talk about that. You don't know about this?
yeah, you've got to register birds now, haven't you? And people are
Yeah,
registering
and
rubber
apparently,
chickens and frozen chickens, which I think is
yeah,
very British and very funny.
it's very funny. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Did
up
you want
there
to say
with.
more about that?
No,
Okay.
you obviously
The
know about it.
banking Tesco apps have been sending texts telling consumers they're buying too much meat and salt and to reconsider their choices. Go boil your head, Tesco and the banks. They're awful, isn't it? Bondi Alegria, Pete says, beautiful morning and sunny day to go and chop some of the fallen
Mm,
trees. Okay, yep.
mm.
He's reframing the devastation into firewood there. Well done. Morning to you, Pete, and thank you for the picture. I look at this. A BA honours, he is. He's a right boffin, his RP. 6 A levels. What a show off. A BA honours, a master's and doctorate. Pete, what are all these in? And still TEFL in a month 30 years ago was one of the hardest qualifications I attained. Very interesting. Why would that be? Morning, Squire. Thoughts are with you and your lovely family. Hope things go well. Yep. Shout out and lots of love and a hug from Portugal. But that's all from us. Thank you, Solo. My visit to Portugal completely inspired me. Never thought I would finish it. It now means I can teach tattooing when I live in Portugal. Oh, yes. Very good. Looking forward to that. The WEF has labelled the outsiders as the discontented, trying to slander us, I'll say us.
Yeah.
Laugh my head off. Yeah, it's shaming, isn't it? We feel times are running out for the opportunity to emigrate, restrictions on freedom of travel, what you can buy, save, or sell. Well, it does certainly feel that way. The way things are going, people will soon make money on padded rooms and a stuffed doll, renting them out as swear and scream rooms.
That's a good idea.
Write that down.
Yeah, write that one down. Yeah.
We don't want to be dependents. We like doing things for ourselves. We like choice. And isn't that a great ethic to have in life? And actually, the digital system is based on being a dependent, isn't it? It's making you, I guess, a modern digital slave. It's very feudal, isn't it? And very, the people controlling you up here and you behaving in a certain way to operate and even exist. It feels like. Is this true, Ray Thompson? I asked a guy in Beijing where all the cats and dogs were. He said we eat them. Animal ethnic cleansing. I wonder if that's true or funny. Do you need biometrics even with a residency permit? Okay, that's an interesting question. What's the answer to that, Tony? What's going to be happening ultimately, not just for the digital ID on the borders, but do you think, well, we do give biometrics for our residency permits, don't we? I did. I'm fingerprinted, retina scanned, anal probe, the whole lot. Not the last one.
Yeah. Well, this is why I say anyway, the reality is, unless you want to go live up a tree, you're going to have digital ID, I think, in a few years. I mean, your choice, what it is to me is that it's going to end up being what I hope is that this you can kind of live outside the system by staying in rural areas. I think that's what we're going to face in the future is that kind of choice.
It does look a lot like that, doesn't it? And Portugal does, I think, look like a good option for that. It's as though in the scheme of human history. I mean, we love looking back at history we're not involved in, don't we? Because of the thrills and spills of ancient history and all the dramas and death and destruction. But it's not so funny when we're involved in a part of it. And I think this is a part of it we're going to be involved in that some of us might not enjoy very much. But like we said before, there's an inevitability about it. And it's about how to cope with that, isn't it? And maybe for some people, it will be becoming one of the disaffected, the unhappy, or whatever those people are being shamed as.
Yeah. Well, I mean, someone mentioned on my channel about countries in Asia where you already have to give you biometrics, and I know, for example, Malaysia, for example, has my fingerprints, and because I've been on holiday there and I had to do all that to go there. So, what for me it is at the moment, the authorities in Malaysia, despite having they haven't got all of the information, they've got some of it, so they can't, like, if I do something to upset the Malaysian government, but it's like I say, it's like
Zoolander.
No, you know what I mean, though,
Derek.
Like if I do something to upset the Malaysian government, it's not like tomorrow I'm suddenly not going to be able to get any cash out of my bank account, right?
But it can happen here. What's more important, Tony, is it can happen here, and it can already happen here.
But that's what I mean. You put a lot of faith in your government, right? Don't you?
Yes.
And I don't have much faith in my government.
No.
So I don't want them to have that. I don't want them to have that much control, because people are saying, because you hear people say, well, if you're not doing anything wrong, but there's things that I want to be able to do that the government probably thinks is wrong. You know what I mean? Like, I want to be able to criticize. Like, you ever look what's happening in the UK at the moment? I mean, people are. I mean, some people have said things on Facebook, for example, and ended up in prison, and they're not things I would have said, and they're things that probably they wish they hadn't said either. Whether or not they went to prison, they probably by the next day thought they shouldn't have said them, that kind of thing. But did they deserve to be in prison? So what I'm seeing is I think there's overreach.
Yeah,
there's overreach by governments that 5 minutes ago we would have thought were reasonably. I wouldn't have thought UK was a totalitarian.
It depends where you are and what you said. It's contextual and momentary, isn't it? Of course, it can be.
Yeah. But what
if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time and the wrong person?
But what I mean, So I mean, for example, in Hong Kong, when I first got to Hong Kong, it was very normal to criticize the mainland government and the CCP, whereas now that will get you put in prison.
Is that
right? For example,
yes.
And in Hong Kong, people have already ceded a lot of their freedoms to so we had things even in Hong Kong, like the UK gave lots of Hong Kong people their the B&O, the B&O, the B&O British, they had this passport called British National Overseas, which didn't really give you any extra rights, but it was something that when the handover happened in Hong Kong, you could either come back to the UK straight away, or you could have this B&O passport and stay. And some people took the B&O. And then after the umbrella movement, the recent political strife in Hong Kong, of course, Britain said, look, if you've got a B&O passport, you can come and live here. Yeah. And the Hong Kong government...
Sorry, not that one. No, okay. All
right. The Hong Kong government retaliated by saying, who are basically the CCP now, the Hong Kong government is basically the CCP now, retaliated by saying, okay, well, if you go, you can't have your pension. You can't have your which people put into, that's people's money that they put into it. They just said, well, you can't have it. That's it. Yeah. If you go, you can't have your pension. And we might even look at seizing assets and all this sort of stuff. So I was advising people. I said, listen, put your B&O passport in your underwear and fly out on your Hong Kong passport, and then pull your B&O out when you get to, and there's that sort of thing. And apparently, apparently I've got an arrest warrant for me in Hong Kong. So
what was for giving out such advice to people?
Well, they won't tell me. I've spoken to the police there, and they won't tell me. They said, just come back.
Come back, and we'll talk to you about it.
Come back, and we'll talk to you about it. Yeah. So but apparently, I've broken this national security law, as they call it.
Really?
And it could be as simple. It could be as simple as something I said on Facebook or whatever. But you can't criticize. You can't criticize the CCP now in Hong Kong, and Hong Kong people have got themselves so in. They're not as bad yet as China, but with things like Octopus card and they've got a number there called
tentacles in every area of your life. That's
your Hong Kong ID number. Yes. And I think I've said before, it's a pro and a con, because where in Portugal, the amount of different numbers you have makes things complicated, right? So you've got your NIF, you've got your social security number, you've got your, there's all different numbers. In Hong Kong, you have one number, right? So your Hong Kong ID is your library card, your driving license, really? Everything.
Which does appear to be very efficient and a utopian dream, doesn't it? But of course, it's all about intention, as ever.
Right.
Yes.
So of course, it can be used against you very quickly. So suddenly, your driving license could just not work anymore.
Wow, very interesting. My old school alumni, Chris Patton, gave Hong Kong to the Chinese. Isn't it funny to think that one man can do that? Compare that to Portugal or UK, bit of a reality shock, absolutely. And the Chinese police and army don't muck about. And guess who owns your electricity in Portugal? Right. They wanted €5,700 for an online PLA course. What's that? I'm not sure what that means.
People's Liberation Army?
Yes, possibly. You could do an online course with them. Interesting contrast. According to morning, John. According to one survey of trust in government, China ranked first. You see, that's what I was asking you about.
Yeah, but you wouldn't say that you didn't trust them though.
Okay, yeah, with 79% and the United States 22%. There you go. So where you're allowed to dissent, the figures are terrible.
I love G. I love.
How is this going to look on my social credit score, I wonder? Where it's not an issue and you can say, I've got no confidence at 22%. Whereas if your life and everything, your turnkey digital life depends on it. Of course, I'm satisfied with this government. I love them. Anything else I can do for you? He thinks ideology has something to do with that. And that's amazing, John. Thank you very much for those statistics there. So what remains then in the last 5 minutes or so of our show this morning is, is how to stay upbeat about this, I think, and what practical solutions you can muster as a result. I mean, certainly rural life in Portugal does look very attractive if the direction of travel in the big cities is all about measurement control. And it is here. One thing I wanted to mention is when I got into a big pickle with all my personal finances and taxation situation here, I went to the cash machine one day and it was shut down to me. And one of my debtors, is that who they would be? Somebody who I invoiced was called by the government and told to pay the government direct and not me. Now that is the sort of stuff we're talking about, isn't it? And that's everyday stuff here in Portugal.
We
do have that.
Portugal's crazy. I mean, I've spoken to people about this who talk about coming here because of this. It's something you were speaking about before. How when you're an expat, it's not just you get that freedom, but also you're kind of insulated in a way, like you don't know what's going on. But actually, Portugal is much more tyrannical than England in many ways.
Yes, but in a way that's not obvious and is still overall very conducive to a decent way of life. Because that's what we're talking about here, isn't it? It's weighing up the balance. And all these ideas of tyranny and totalitarianism, like I said before, probably all countries have always been like that. If you're the wrong person in the wrong place,
the wrong
time of history. But I guess it's assessing the bigger picture, isn't it? It's like, okay, that's true, and this is what you and I discuss a lot, isn't it? Opposite things can be true at the same time. It can be seen.
There's context, right? There's always context,
and it can be seen as tyrannical, but it can also be seen, and it is seen and enjoyed as an amazing place to have your life. So it's very complicated or complex. Was that survey conducted via WeChat? Then I guess most negative answers were deleted.
Probably no one was ever asked, to be honest.
Yeah, there's no need to ask people, is there, with a survey of that kind? Those trying to control, I wish them luck. I got no control over myself. So how they're going to accomplish that is beyond me. So yeah, I do. I think it's very interesting. Again, foot on the gas, foot on the accelerator. Not both. The gas and the brake, and we're moving perhaps into or developing the consciousness of like, I can see that's true, but I can also see that that's true, which is a completely opposite to be considered in the same mind. And these are the issues sometimes we're living in, perhaps, aren't they, when weighing up such issues. And it is easy, I think, to get a little bit depressed and upset by it, which I think inspired your video and a lot of the comments, obviously, that come in as a result of making a video of that kind, but also balancing that with, generally speaking, if you pretty much sail the right side of things, this is a fabulous place to be. Where else are you going to go?
An argument on the other side would be if you're a Trekkie, and that kind of utopian future is what you want, then this transition needs to happen. Actually,
yes, right.
This transition does need to happen. So,
yes,
it's
we are in a transition, aren't we? And yes,
I mean, I have to accept on some level that it's possible that I'm wrong, and that actually, everyone having a digital ID and a kind of all this universal credit and all, because as I've said to you before, Carl, sometimes I worry that I'm not giving things their dues because I think you can be ideologically captured without knowing that you're ideologically captured. Do you know what I
Always,
mean?
yes, definitely.
And
The worst
sometimes you
way.
have to think,
Yes.
maybe this is the best way. I just don't know.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
do,
yeah.
but I do think it's inevitable anyway.
I agree with you. I agree with you. And how are we going to, going back to the East, how will we Tai Chi and flow with that inevitability? God's God tip of the day, then, as I've mentioned on a number of occasions, falling is one of the big dangers as we grow older. We take longer and longer to mend until eventually we don't. Oh, so it's worth avoiding. Here's some simple exercise for leg strength that will help you stay upright. Stand sideways on the stairs with one foot on the step above the other. Oh, this looks like fun. Keeping the lower leg straight and hips horizontal. Straighten the upper leg quickly, then lower down again. Ah, very good.
Weighted vest as well. I've been using a weighted vest, and what's been interesting about that is when I first put it on, guys, I really noticed it froze your balance for a while putting on that extra weight, because obviously you can have that same weight using shopping bags, but the center of gravity is lower, right?
Yes.
But when you put on a weighted vest, it's quite amazing how much it throws off your balance. But then, of course, after walking with a vest for a few weeks, your legs strengthen up around the ankles.
Very good.
Yeah. So now I don't feel that at all. Even when I'm walking like in the woods or whatever, I really feel quite balanced. So I think that's a really good way to increase your leg strength and your balance.
Coach Turner and the Portuguese are working together. Repeat that 10 times on each leg, 3 to 4 times a day. What are you doing on the stairs? Ah, yes. If you're unsure of your balance, use the banister or wall to help, or a passerby. This strength.
Well, that sounds like Tesco now, doesn't it? If you're unsure of your balance, use the banister or wall to help, and then also remember to blink so that your eyes don't dry out.
This strengthens the legs, but also, thank you for that. This strengthens the legs, but also by keeping the hips horizontal, works the core muscles. Yes, so keep those hips horizontal.
Just before we go, Carl, can I just say one more thing?
Yeah.
Tesco, who have been messaging customers to say, look, we noticed that you're buying quite a lot of salty products, so we recommend cutting down on your salt.
Yeah.
Now, I think this is a context thing, because at the moment, a lot of us are worried about, the bloody nanny state and
tyrannical
health and safety gone mad and everything like that.
Yeah.
But you could look at it in another way and think, that's quite nice that somebody in this company has made an effort to sort of think about that, and how's that going to benefit them?
Bottom line, I'm suspecting. But anyway, no, let's not get cynical at the end there, because this is interesting, because I know you've got a plan as well. Tiny population. Oh, just a couple of things. The top 5 trusted governments are Switzerland, Luxembourg, Finland, Sweden, and Norway. And Pete saying tiny populations with massive oil money are better governments. Shocking news. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? And it sounded like your escape plan might be France. Is that right, Tony? Were you looking at opportunities in France?
Oh, was I looking at opportunities in France? Well,
yes.
I'll tell you a funny story, Carl.
Go on, Tony.
Yeah. I've applied to go and work at Citroen.
Really?
Yeah, but it's really funny. The recruitment process is really odd. They've asked me to make 2 CVs.
Hey, thank you, Tony. Take care, everybody. See you this evening for the Expats Portugal webinar and the Dream Team at 9.
There's a YouTube show full of fun facts you need to know. Carl rings the bell and the members show to the GMP morning show. Featured guests will come and they will blow your mind. The audience will do so in kind. A little vanity mixed with some insanity on the morning show with GMP. Hey, Gumpers.